Hello and welcome back to Pandemic Playground with Dave. So today we have another experiment for you guys, and that is digging / mining with warheads. So today's experiment was working with warheads to create mining holes or digging holes vertically below. And believe it or not, this was my first version of the build I had in mind. But we'll go over this in a second. So I was playing around with making warheads to create a hole, much like we digged for our underground base, but of course with the warheads more circular. So I was trying to look for a way to do that more symmetrically with a nice downwards circle in a way. And I found a decent way of doing it, and it seems to work out pretty well. So let's talk about the build. Alright, so first off, I had to make the station a little bit long so that when it hits the ground and explodes, there's a pretty big radius. And we didn't want the radius to knock on the legs, because once you knock out the legs, the whole thing's going to fall down. So that's the main purpose of that. And then we had to add some pistons with some grinders. We also added some welders on the side and also project these warheads. So you have this projector back here. And also plumbed up everything so it kind of recycles parts if necessary. Minus the warhead parts in this current version of it, because we are in creative mode. But of course, if you have all the parts to make all these things in survival, you can easily do the same thing. But I'm just working with creative just to see if it works. Alright, so with that said, what I did is basically make some kind of warhead contraption and copied it into a blueprint and projected it. So basically for this one, what I did is basically grab pretty much like a line of blocks and added a bit of these protruding blocks on the side, added some warheads like that, and then armed them, because you have to arm them so you can put in your blueprints so that you don't have to constantly arm them once they're welded together. And then I projected it so that it'll display here. So for example, if I were to remove the warheads, you'll see the projection over there too. Same thing with these blocks as well. So there's another set of blocks right behind here, but it's already welded, that's why it's not projecting it. But this actually works out pretty well, because once I get into the cockpit or whatever system you have, hit the weld button, it'll just weld up everything that's there. So it's welding up that projection I made down there, basically. And the cool part is that they're all armed, as you see here. They're yellow, yellow, yellow. And they become very sensitive when you're playing with armed warheads, which is kind of like common sense in a way. So yeah, so more complicated part of the build is all timing blocks back here. So the timing blocks helps me kind of automate the whole system. So what I did here is basically initiate the first piston to go forward at a certain timer, and it'll grind down this block so that it'll drop this warhead. And then it's going to activate the next timer to say this piston to go. So it's one at a time and not all together. That way it causes less accidents or less explosions and things like that. So unfortunately, I'm not going to go through each and every timing block and how they're set up. It's just generally this one's going to go forward, retract. This one goes forward, retract. That one goes forward, retract. This one goes forward, retract. This one goes forward, retract. And whilst they're dropping down one at a time, once we hit the last one, we have the welders weld up all these blocks and the warheads as a projection right here, and pretty much resets all over again. And then it's going to ask the first one to go through, second one to go through, third, fourth, and fifth one. And of course, you can make this really tall if you want to, or you can make it just one at a time to make it simple. I just wanted to play around with like the pistons and timer blocks and everything like that. I also created this little cockpit out here so that when you jump into the system, you can actually see everything that's going on. So that was just for aesthetic reasonings. But yeah, everything is pretty much set up. All I have to do is hit 2 to make it start. And you'll see the first piston go right. Next one's gonna go and so forth. So let's just hit it in 3, 2, 1. So as you see here, the first one starts. It's going to grind down the cube or block on the warhead, and then it's gonna allow the warhead to just drop down and make a nice, pretty decent hole in the bottom to start our mining project right there. So you see this pretty significant hole, and the next few is gonna keep dropping. So it's gonna go through the cycle 5 times basically, and then it's gonna reset and do it again. So this build is a little more symmetrical. It's an even drop, so there's no like differences in the drops. Basically, it's all going to drop exactly in the middle of that little crater that's created, which is great. And then the weirdest thing is this: even though there's no block there, the warhead's likely to hang around a little bit, but it does eventually drop, like so. So that's a bit of a weird thing about it, but as I mentioned, it just goes right down the center and keeps dropping down the center into that big hole that we're creating here, which is great. So we're on the last cycle of this platform, and it's gonna grind it down, drop the last one, it's gonna give it a few, and then it's gonna weld up everything back together again. So it should do that in a few seconds. There. And it's instant, quick, done. There's a little bit of delays and gaps in between, so that, you know, the last one doesn't hang too long and then it welds up and then blows everything up. So that's the reasoning for that. But now everything's resetted as the beginning. And that, again, that's all done through timing blocks, cycling over and over and over again, basically, after each sequence. So that was actually the second system I built that's a little bit better than what I had in mind the first time, which I'll show you right now. So actually, this was the very first machine that I had in mind for this project, or for this experiment, in how to drop warheads down into the floor to create a big hole. And initially, if you might see it here a little bit, I created some kind of funnel so that, like, if there's like a ball rolling down, for example, I'm just gonna put a non-activated warhead here. You see these little curves? It just makes it roll down and then into this little circle or hole where it'll just drop. So it worked out decently at first with non-armed warheads, but once they were armed, every time it collided, it just blew up everything. So that was the worst part about it. And again, playing with warheads that are armed are very sensitive, so, you know, a decent drop will blow it up. So about 1 block drop, let's just say up to here, armed, it'll just blow up. So in order to create a system where it won't blow up or not be too sensitive, what I did was add a lot of types of wheels in the system so that it can just bounce around in there and make sure that it doesn't hit too hard or anything like that. So for an example, if I threw a warhead here, you'll see that it rolls down the conveyor belt. Not something you've seen before that I built. And also I created these little wall ones too, just to kind of push it along. It's kind of like a warhead car wash, you can call it. And then it drops into this little hole section here, which a little bit more wheels, and it just makes it a little bit more tight. But the biggest problem I have with this is that it's not going to be an even or symmetrical drop every single time the warhead falls down. And the worst part is, this machine is not consistent because it can potentially blow up. I think the longest I had this running as a test was about 10 minutes until it blew up the platform itself. So, yeah. This one's a fun build, a really cool looking one, but it's probably not the most practical rig for this kind of project or this kind of experiment. So as you see here, this one's gonna constantly go and drop down these warheads, make a nice hole, and it's all even and everything like that. This one is likely not gonna do that, and you don't even know when it's gonna blow up, to be honest. So this rig is pretty much made up of this kind of the same concept. A welder here to weld up a block with a warhead. So that is going to be a block like that with the warhead attached here, and arm it from there. And then of course you want to copy that and put it into your blueprints, and then you have a projector up there to project that one block and that armed warhead. So the welder here will weld it up along with the warhead, this hinge with the grinder is going to grind down the block itself, and then the warhead will slowly fall on this to this ramp. And this ramp is actually made up of the light armor slope block, the 2x1x1, and also the light armor slope 2x1x1 tip. So it makes it a nice softer row than you would do with a slope block, a full slope block, which would be this one here, the light armor slope block. So that way, once this thing is grinded down, the warhead just drops a little bit, rolls into the conveyor system here, and then it'll just bounce around a little bit as if I am the warhead, hits here, gets kind of caught up with the wheels here, and then falls down and make that hoe. So this one was a little more complicated in terms of the wheels. So I have large grid 1x1 wheels, we have small grid 3x3 wheels on the walls, and here is a mixture of the same thing, 3x3 wheels here, so that once the warhead gets right here, it doesn't smack this wall too hard and blow up. But I mean, eventually it does happen once in a while. So that's pretty much the system. And everything, again, it's on a timer system, but it's a lot less timers because all we're doing is telling the system to weld up the projection, bring the hinge grinder down to grind up this block, allow the warhead to roll down, bring it back to this 0 degrees angle, and then weld up the warhead block again. So for an example, we're going to turn this guy on. Let's go build the warhead. The hinge should slope down and grind down that block, and it will just create this warhead to just fall down slowly and roll without any big issues. So it's nice and slow, not too crazy, and it's just gonna roll down this section, and hopefully it doesn't blow up in my face, but it can. Eventually it will happen. Maybe I should just lower the rotation of the wheels here, but for the most part it works okay. When the other warhead catches up to it, like sometimes it blows up, sometimes it nudges it a little bit to help it go through. But this system, it was fun to build. It was a good experiment to see if you can do a conveyor with these warheads, and once it hits here, it falls down. So this system kind of works. Again, it's not going to be the perfect fall. As you see there, it's not probably the middle of the circle, so it creates a little bit of a offset. And again, it's going to blow up the whole system just like that. So that one didn't last long at all. And that just falls into the hole anyways. So that was the experiment to create these warhead mining machines, and one with a conveyor and one with more of just grinding and welding, which of course this one works much better. This one works only by chance, and of course it looks actually cooler in a way, but to be practical, a general grinding welding type of machine, let it drop, makes one of the better mining holes or digging holes here with this system. So if I go to my spectator mode, you'll see here that's created a pretty nice hole, no offsets whatsoever. And then if we looked at this one, so this one blew up too soon anyway, so it's a little hard to tell, but it definitely does create a little bit of offset, not too much of an offset, but just a little bit, because this system, let me just load it back up. Alright, so the system creates that offset because it's not a perfect drop all the time, because it bounces around in here a little bit, because it's about 1.5 cubes wide. There's no way that I can make it where it's only a cube in the middle, because the warhead doesn't want to move if you did something like that. So yeah, once again, this experiment was kind of interesting and fun for myself in a way, because I don't know, my mind works in a weird way where I thought of doing this first, and then I thought of doing something more simple after the fact. So again, this one works better. It's a pretty cool explosive mining type of rig, and this one's more, it's the same thing as explosive mining rig too, but I guess with more, you know, visual effects and you know, a small chance of success in a way. But it was fun. Alright, so I'm going to cue in a time lapse of each system working properly. Of course, if you can imagine, this one took a few tries to get a decent time lapse out of it. But honestly, I do like... Ooh, that system decided to blow up too. Alright, so I'll see you guys next time. Alright, so if you guys enjoyed that experience, please hit that thumbs up, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and also leave us some comments to help with the analytics. And of course, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.